Hello. So in this episode of Writing Notes, I'm going to give you another teaching strategy, and this is one that has a ton of potential applications. It's basically comparison and contrast. So I've done this in a number of different ways. The basic fundamental thing that you do for this activity is you give students multiple versions of a particular thing. I usually do 3 because I feel like that's enough to show students different approaches without overwhelming them. And then you ask students to look carefully at the 3 different examples and decide, and you can approach this a couple of ways. You can either have them decide which is most effective, which is most persuasive. You can have them think about what's most appealing to them and why. Obviously, you don't want to just leave it at which one of these 3 things do you like the best. You also want to say, and why. So get them to think about it. Or another approach that I think is really, really useful with the comparison and contrast activity is to have students think about what techniques from these things would you want to borrow. So which bits and pieces would you want to incorporate into your own whatever it is that we're doing. So a couple of examples of how I've used this activity, and these are things that generally can work well in the classroom or online. So these are very flexible activities. I use this a lot for my business writing classes, so I'm going to start with those examples, but I will give you a couple examples for a first-year composition class as well. So one of the things that I find really useful in terms of the comparison and contrast activity is showing students different approaches to resume design. So resume design is very flexible. There's a lot of different types, different strategies you can use, and I've done a video on resume design before. You should be seeing a link for that in the top corner. But what I will do when I'm in the physical classroom is I will actually print out versions of the first page of my CV, because resume should only be 1 page, so I only give them the first page. But I've created 3 versions of the first page of my CV with different resume styles. So one is just the way that I have my CV set up. One is set up based on the structure that the Smeal College of Business mandates here at Penn State. And then another is a different approach, a third approach to resume design. And in the classroom, I will take those and I will tape them up on the board, or I will tape them on the side walls, one on each side wall and one on the back wall. I've done it both ways, either on the board if you've got enough room in the front, or on the 3 walls, and have students go and look at all 3 of them and take notes about whatever question you're asking. Which is most effective, which is most visually persuasive, or which is most visually accessible, what strategies would you want to use? Whatever questions you're asking them to think about. You have them go through and look at all 3 of these different resume designs, and not only does that show them different approaches, it also gets them thinking comparatively about what works better, what doesn't work as well, etc., etc. And so that pushes them to hopefully make more effective decisions for their own resume design. Another thing that I've done this with in business writing is website design. So I teach a project that I call the personal website project. They basically have to create a personal page with some blogs, some blog posts about current ideas or issues or debates in their field, in either business in general or their specific field, like accounting or turfgrass sciences or fashion design or whatever it is. But I will give them 3 personal web pages, and again, it's the same kind of thing. This is actually a little bit easier to do online because you have to kind of have to have them online for this anyway, if they're going to look at these websites. But you can do this in the classroom, provided that you have access to a computer classroom. But again, it's the same basic thing. You would have them look at the 3 different websites and say, okay, what parts of the visual rhetoric, the organization, the layout, the font choices, the colors, etc., do I think work best, and why? What would I want to take from these models to incorporate into my personal website? And again, you can also do this with first-year writing. These are just, and this is a vastly flexible approach where you have students compare things. But some of the things that I've had students look at comparatively in first-year writing are thesis statements. So let's look at 3 different versions of a thesis statement about the same topic, and we'll discuss which one works best and why. I've had them look at introductions. So again, 3 different introductions to the same paper, three rewritten versions doing different things, what's most effective and why. And then paragraph structure, like a body paragraph of an essay. Here's 3 different versions of a body paragraph about the same subject. Which one has the best structure? Which one is most effective in making the case that this paragraph is making, and why? And again, this is really, really useful. I'd say you could apply it to almost anything that you want students to get multiple models of, which is always useful for students, and that you want them to think critically about the choices that these authors have made, or that you want them to think critically about the choices that they're going to make. So it's a vastly flexible activity, and there's a lot of specific benefits. You can apply it in a multitude of settings, and again, you can do this online or you can do this in person.